Imagine the very moment your mind cracks open. You are an astropath, a sanctioned psyker of the Imperium, trained to whisper messages across the stars. But tonight, the whispers do not answer back. Instead, a deafening roar of a billion screaming souls floods your fragile consciousness. The psychic backlash boils your eyes in their sockets and shatters your sanity in a fraction of a second. This is not a nightmare. This is the first agonizing warning that your world is about to die. What really happens when a planet is swallowed by a warp storm? In the grim darkness of the far future, the veil between the physical universe and the Immaterium is terrifyingly thin. We often think of a storm as a natural cosmic weather event, a temporary disruption of stellar travel or communication. But a warp storm is not weather. It is a living, breathing entity of pure, unadulterated malice, an intrusion of hell itself into the material realm. Consider this: the physical universe operates on absolute laws, like gravity, time, and thermodynamics. The Immaterium, however, is a dimension composed entirely of raw emotion, chaotic energy, and the predatory consciousness of the dark gods. When a warp storm envelops a world, it does not simply bombard it with radiation. It actively dissolves the fundamental rules of reality, replacing them with the twisted, impossible whims of demons. It is the total unraveling of existence. Before we decode the horrifying, step-by-step process of a planet being consumed by the Sea of Souls, take a moment to anchor yourself. Subscribe to the channel and join our ranks if you are brave enough to peer into the deepest abyss of Warhammer for OK lore. Hit the bell, or risk being lost in the Empyrean when the next storm breaks. Now, let us witness the bleeding of the sky. Long before the physical atmospheric changes occur, the warp storm casts a psychic shadow. The initial warning does not appear on orbital auspex scanners or meteorological cogitators. It manifests within the minds of the astropathic choirs. These unsung conduits of the Imperium are the first casualties. Entire choirs begin to chant in dissonant, agonizing harmonies, bleeding black fluid from their ears and eyes. Some spontaneously combust in their sanctums, their souls ignited by the sheer friction of the approaching chaotic tide. Once the astropaths burn out, the true isolation begins. The planet is plunged into an absolute communication blackout. Distress signals hurled into the void are swallowed by the screaming silence of the Immaterium. You are no longer part of the vast Imperium of man. Your world is alone, fragile raft cut adrift in an ocean of nightmares. And then, the physical reality begins to reflect the spiritual decay. Look up. The sky, once a familiar expanse of blue or the smoke-choked gray of a hive world, begins to bleed. It does not merely change color. It bruisingly mutates. Swaths of violently saturated violets, sickening bruised purples, and deep arterial reds streak across the atmosphere. Roars of unnatural, sickly light dance during the day, casting nauseating shadows that seem to stretch and twitch on their own accord. The celestial bodies, your sun and moons, are blotted out by a cosmic cataract. Consider the psychological toll of this shifting firmament. It is not just an optical phenomenon. The unnatural colors carry a psychic weight, pressing down on the minds of the population with a suffocating sense of dread. Agoraphobia spreads like a contagion. Looking at the heavens induces extreme vertigo, nausea, and bleeding from the gums. People feel the gaze of something unimaginably vast and hateful staring back at them through the bruised clouds. Down on the surface, the revered technology of the Adeptus Mechanicus begins to suffer a terrifying sickness. Machine spirits, the localized operational systems of Imperial tech, grow restless, then violently schizophrenic. Automated blast doors slam shut, crushing workers. Cogitators spew lines of nonsensical, blasphemous text across their emerald screens, reciting litanies to forgotten, dark entities. The hum of plasma generators shifts into a frequency that sounds disturbingly like human whimpering. The machines are experiencing terror. But what if the technology is not merely malfunctioning? What if it is becoming infected by the very essence of the Immaterium? The air grows thick, tasting of copper, ozone, and dried blood. Static electricity dances across every surface, raising the hairs on your arms. This is the death rattle of the cosmic barrier that once protected your sector. The planetary shielding is gone. The material universe is surrendering. At this exact moment, a profound and horrifying realization washes over the planetary governors and defense commanders alike. Their fortress walls, their orbital defense lasers, and their millions of conscripts are utterly meaningless against what is coming. They have prepared for a war of ballistics and logistics. But they are about to face a war of conceptual annihilation. The sky has finished bleeding. Now, the fabric of reality itself is preparing to tear. When the veil finally shatters, the transition is not marked by an explosion, but by a sickening metaphysical silence. The physical laws that have governed the universe since its inception simply cease to apply. You have spent your entire life trusting that gravity pulls downward, that time flows forward, and that solid objects remain solid. Now, the Immaterium rewrites the code of existence. It is not chaos in the sense of random destruction. It is chaos in the form of a malicious, deliberate unmaking of reality. The first casualty is often gravity. Within the towering spires of a hive city, the downward pull suddenly inverts, or worse, becomes subjective. Millions of HAB workers are violently thrown upward, crushed against the ceilings of their manufactories. In other sectors, gravity simply turns off, leaving massive transit trains floating helplessly before they are torn apart by localized gravitational vortexes. The very ground beneath your feet ceases to be a reliable foundation, undulating like a breathing chest. Time itself becomes a fractured, schizophrenic concept. In a warp storm, chrono devices spin wildly, fast-forwarding through centuries in a matter of seconds, or freezing entirely. You might witness a comrade age into dust within a single heartbeat, while a dropped macro shell hangs suspended in midair, refusing to fall for hours. You are trapped in localized time loops, forced to relive the moment of your greatest terror over and over again. The linear progression of cause and effect is completely severed. The spatial geometry of your world twists into impossible, non-Euclidean shapes. Straight corridors stretch into infinite, spiraling labyrinths. Stepping through a door in your familiar HAB block might deposit you thousands of miles away, or perhaps into a dark void where no air exists. Architecture turns predatory, hallways crush inward, staircases lead into impossibly deep chasms, and the angles of the walls induce a sickening, maddening vertigo. Space is no longer a physical dimension. It is a hostile entity. What happens when the fundamental laws of your existence simply turn off? Imagine standing in your quarters as the world outside dissolves. The water from your reclamation sink does not drain. It flows upward in a serpentine stream, pulling on the ceiling in defiance of physics. You light a lumen torch, but the fire freezes solid, radiating a biting, necrotizing cold instead of warmth. You stare at your reflection in the mirror, seeking some anchor of sanity. But then, your reflection blinks a full second after you do, and slowly, maliciously, it smiles while your face remains frozen in terror. This is the true horror of a warp storm. It does not simply kill you like a conventional weapon. It turns reality into a sadistic playground where your deepest fears dictate the laws of physics. The universe itself gaslights you into sheer, unbreakable insanity. You are no longer living in the material realm. You are a plaything in an ocean of raw, predatory emotion. If you want to survive the darkest corners of Warhammer for okay, you must understand the nature of this madness. Hit that subscribe button, join our ranks, and prepare your mind for the horrors yet to come. Now, consider the flesh. Because when the physics of the world break down, the physics of your own body are next. As the chaotic energies wash over the planet, a wave of spontaneous, agonizing biological mutation sweeps through the population. This is not the slow process of evolution. It is the violent, rapid rewriting of human DNA by the raw stuff of the Immaterium. Flesh becomes as malleable as clay, and sanctioned psychers explode in bursts of localized warp fire, while ordinary citizens suddenly sprout extra limbs, eyes, or jagged rays of bone bursting through their skin. The agony of these transformations is beyond human comprehension. Imagine your internal organs shifting, rearranging themselves while you're fully conscious. People scream as their vocal cords stretch into monstrous, inhuman shapes, producing sounds that shatter glass and rupture eardrums. The air is filled with the chorus of billions of souls trapped in bodies that are rebelling against them. The warp does not care for the integrity of the human form. It only seeks to mold it into vessels for its own amusement. Even the inanimate world is not spared from this biological corruption. Stone bleeds. Plascrete walls begin to palpitate with a fleshy, wet rhythm, growing veins and weeping acidic tears. Weapons fuse with the hands of the soldiers wielding them, blurring the line between machine and man. You might lean against a bulkhead, only to feel it breathe, hear a heartbeat echoing from within the steel, and realize the ship itself is becoming a living, tortured organism. Conceptual impossibilities become everyday occurrences. You witness colors that have no name, colors that induce physical trauma and spontaneous hemorrhage just by looking at them. You hear the sound of a dying star in the drop of a pin, and smell the scent of ancient grief in the metallic tang of bolter fire. The sensory input is so overwhelmingly contradictory that the brain simply begins to shut down, retreating into catatonia or violent psychosis. The psychological impact on the rational mind is absolute devastation. Logic, reason, and scientific understanding are rendered completely obsolete. The scholars and tech priests who try to measure or understand these anomalies are the first to lose their minds. To comprehend the warp is to invite it inside. The human brain is a fragile mechanism, designed to process a predictable reality. When faced with the infinite impossibility of the Immaterium, the only logical response is absolute, shrieking madness. Ultimately, the barrier between the conscious mind and the physical world dissolves entirely. Your deepest traumas, your hidden guilts, and your darkest nightmares are ripped from your subconscious and given physical form. If a hive city fears starvation, the streets will flood with skeletal, ravenous entities. If a garrison fears betrayal, their shadows will detach and slit their throats. Reality is no longer an external environment. It is a projection of the planet's collective terror. The physics of madness have completely unraveled the world. The planet is no longer anchored in the Immaterium. It has slipped its moorings and is slowly sinking into the churning depths of the Sea of Souls. The stage is set, the veil is gone, and the laws of nature are dead. And now, into this twisted, bleeding reality, the true masters of the warp step forward. The demons are coming. As the physical laws of the planet finish their catastrophic collapse, the true horror of the warp storm reveals itself. This is not a planetary invasion in any conventional military sense. There are no drop pods burning through the atmosphere, no alien armadas blacking out the sun. Instead, the veil between realities simply dissolves, and the Immaterium bleeds its denizens directly into the material world. Nightmares do not invade. They simply walk out of the shadows, stepping into your reality. The manifestation of a demon is a sensory assault that shatters the human mind. The temperature violently plummets, freezing the breath in your lungs, while the oppressive stench of rotting meat, rusted iron, and burning ozone fills the air. Demons do not require transport. They tear their way through the fabric of space itself, crawling out of shattered mirrors, emerging from the pools of blood on the floor, or bursting violently from the mutating bodies of unprotected psychers. You must understand the nature of what you are facing. These entities are not biological organisms born of evolution. They are sentient, predatory concepts. A bloodletter of corn is not merely an alien beast holding a sword. It is the physical embodiment of murder, a construct of pure, crystallized rage. A plague bearer of Nurgle is the cosmic concept of despair and decay given rotting flesh. Their emotions weaponized by the dark gods, set loose upon a defenseless world. The terrifying reality of fighting a demon is that conventional warfare is almost entirely rendered obsolete. Imagine raising your lascar, your hands shaking with absolute terror, and firing a volley into a charging horror. The concentrated energy beams might simply pass right through its semi-translucent form, or strike its unnatural flesh only to heal instantly. You are trying to shoot a bad dream with a rifle. The paralyzing realization that your weapons are useless is often what kills you first. Demons do not merely assault the flesh, they launch a coordinated, devastating attack on the soul. They do not fight with martial honor. They whisper your deepest, most shameful secrets as they close the distance. They project hallucinations, making themselves appear as your dead loved ones or weeping children, forcing you to hesitate for a fatal microsecond. They break your will, devouring your sanity and your hope long before their rusted blades ever touch your physical body. The scale of the daemonic incursion defies all logistical comprehension. It is not a localized breach. It is a global flood. The bruised, bleeding sky violently tears open in a jagged rupture, disgorging impossible, swarming millions of these horrors. Blood rains down in torrential sheets, flooding the manufacturers. Towering greater demons, entities so vast and terrible they warp the gravity around them, stride across the ruined spires of hive cities like living, malevolent gods of destruction. Planetary defense forces do not merely lose ground. They experience total psychological collapse. Entire regiments of seasoned Imperial Guard break and run. Not from tactical disadvantage, but from mass, uncontrollable hysteria. Soldiers turn their weapons upon themselves, choosing the quick oblivion of a lost blast to the temple over the agonizing, eternal torment promised by the encroaching daemonic tide. The organized military of the Immaterium crumbles into screaming, stampeding mobs in a matter of hours. When the last line of defense shatters, and the nightmares walk freely through the streets of your home, it is terrifyingly easy to surrender to the despair. But do not let the warp claim your mind just yet. If you are surviving this descent into madness, fortify your soul by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Stand strong against the Immaterium. The true nightmare of the warp storm is only just beginning, and the worst is yet to come. In the face of a daemonic incursion, the immediate human instinct is to rely on the familiar tools of survival: steel, firepower, and martial discipline. But this is the grand illusion of resistance. The planetary defense force, numbering in the millions, represents the blunt trauma of a conventional military. Yet, against the war, military doctrine is a cruel joke. Tactics designed to hold physical territory are entirely meaningless when the territory itself has become a sentient, hostile entity actively trying to consume you. Consider the standard issue lascar, the reliable backbone of the Imperial Guard. It fires a focused beam of searing energy, capable of punching through plasteel armor. But how do you pierce the armor of a concept? When a guardsman fires at a shimmering horror of the Immaterium, the lost beam often dissipates harmlessly into a mist of raw emotion. You cannot burn despair. You cannot outflank madness. The physical arsenal of humanity is catastrophically ill-equipped to combat enemies born from the realm of pure thought. Even the Adeptus Astartes, the legendary space marines, find themselves drowning in the storm. These transhuman giants are forged to be the ultimate physical warriors, clad in ceramite and wielding bolters that fire mass-reactive explosive shells. But transhuman physiology does not make one immune to psychic obliteration. When the air itself turns into screaming warp fire and the ground opens into a moor of razor-sharp teeth, even a space marine's unparalleled combat prowess is reduced to a desperate, flailing struggle for survival. The tragedy of this resistance is that the harder the Imperium fights using logic and logistics, the faster they fall. Command centers attempt to coordinate artillery strikes, only to realize the Vox networks are broadcasting the tortured screams of their own gunners from 3 hours in the future. Supply lines are not severed by enemy patrols. They are swallowed by suddenly manifesting chasms of flesh. The military machine requires order to function, and the warp storm is the absolute antithesis of order. When steel shatters and logic fails, only one weapon remains: absolute and yielding faith in the God Emperor of mankind. It is a known phenomenon that a truly faithful soul can manifest a localized or of denial, a psychic shield powered by pure devotion. Sometimes, a priest clutching an imperial aquila can repel a daemonic beast simply by screaming litanies of hatred. But faith is a fragile, exhausting shield in the endless, suffocating darkness of a warp storm. Even the most zealous believer eventually succumbs to the crushing weight of eternity. For the billions of ordinary citizens crammed into the suffocating, rusted spires of a hive city, the warp storm is not a military defeat. It is the onset of a living, inescapable hell. There are no evacuation protocols for a phenomenon that swallows the entire planet. As the power grid fails and the lumens die, you are plunged into absolute, crushing darkness alongside millions of panicked, terrified souls. The claustrophobia alone is enough to break the fragile minds of the masses before the demons even rise. But the darkness is not empty. The Immaterium is a realm composed of raw emotion, and a hive city is an overflowing battery of fear, hatred, and despair. As the veil collapses, the collective psychic agony of billions bleeds directly into the material world. Mass hysteria sweeps through the hablocks like a viral contagion. You hear your neighbor screaming as their deepest, most unspeakable nightmares are violently ripped from their subconscious and manifested as physical, stalking horrors in the narrow corridors. In the face of such incomprehensible terror, the human mind desperately seeks a coping mechanism. For many, that mechanism is absolute surrender. Hidden chaos cults, previously festering in the dark underbelly of the hive, suddenly rise to prominence. They do not bring salvation, they bring the agonizing promise of survival through subservience. You watch in paralyzed horror as ordinary hub workers, driven mad by the psychic pressure, begin to chant blasphemous litanies, painting the walls with the blood of the unfaithful. The social contract evaporates in a matter of hours. Survival becomes a gruesome mathematics of appeasement. To stave off the encroaching demons, the desperate populaces turn on each other. You lock your hab door, but the frantic scratching, the weeping pleas of your friends echo from the hallway, begging you to open it. When you refuse, the weeping turns to vicious, snarling laughter. In a warp storm, the monsters outside are often the people you once trusted with your life. Even if you survive the cultists and the rioting mobs, the environment itself becomes a predatory organism. The metallic veins of the hive city mutate into pulsing, fleshy arteries. The stagnant water reclamation pools turn into boiling vats of acidic blood and rotting viscera. You cannot hide, because the very walls are listening, whispering your sins back to you in the voices of dead relatives. The architecture is actively shifting to herd you toward the slaughter. The most terrifying realization of a warp storm is the complete devaluation of death. In the physical universe, death is an ending, a final release from suffering. But when the Immaterium overlaps with reality, your soul is no longer protected by the barrier of the material. If a demon kills you, it does not simply end your biological functions. It rips your soul from your flesh and drags it screaming into the sea of souls to be tortured and consumed for eternity. Consider the gravity of that metaphysical horror. Your consciousness does not fade to black. You remain completely aware as your essence is slowly digested by entities of pure malice. The pain you experience in the physical world is merely a pale shadow of the agonizing, conceptual torment inflicted upon an unprotected soul in the war. The citizens of this doomed world are not merely dying. They are being harvested as eternal fuel for the dark gods. As the days or weeks bleed into a singular, agonizing eternity, the planet is entirely stripped of its humanity. The billions of souls that once populated the sprawling hive cities are silenced. Their bodies twisted into grotesque monuments to chaos. Their spirits consumed. The living hell has served its purpose. The world has been digested by the storm, and what remains in its wake is an abomination that defies all sanity. Eventually, the chaotic energies might recede, or the storm might stabilize into a permanent rupture in the fabric of space. But the world left behind in the wake of the Immaterium is no longer the one that existed before. The physical devastation is secondary to the profound metaphysical corruption. The soul itself is permanently poisoned with warptain. The oceans are irrevocably transmuted into sludge or ash, and the atmosphere carries the eternal, maddening echoes of the billions who perished. If the storm does not break, the planet crosses a terrifying and irreversible threshold. It completes its dark metamorphosis into a demon world. This is a planetary body entirely subsumed by the war, existing simultaneously in the material universe and the Sea of Souls. Geography is completely reshaped by the specific whims of the dark god who claimed it. A conquered world might become a jagged landscape of brass mountains and oceans of boiling blood, or a decaying garden of cosmic pestilence. The flora and fauna that somehow survived the initial transition are mutated into grotesque, aggressive caricatures of life. Forests of weeping bone, rivers of infectious bile, and skies that scream in perpetual agony become the new natural order. Any humans who endured the slaughter are no longer human in any recognizable sense. They are twisted, mind-broken husks, reduced to slaves bound to the eternal service of their daemonic overlords, existing in a state of perpetual, agonizing worship. The corruption left by a warp storm is not a physical stain that can be cleansed. The Imperium cannot simply deploy the Imperial Guard to retake the planet, rebuild the shattered hive cities, and repopulate the manufactories. The very bedrock of the world is infected with a highly contagious spiritual rot. To merely set foot on such a ruined planet is to invite the taint directly into your own soul. The world becomes a permanent, festering wound in reality. This horrifying reality is precisely why the Inquisition responds to full-scale daemonic incursions with the ultimate sanction, exterminatus. It is not an act of political malice, but of absolute grim necessity. When a world has been swallowed and digested by a warp storm, planetary annihilation is the only form of mercy left. Cyclonic torpedoes and virus bombs are deployed to scour the taint from existence, burning the planet down to a lifeless cinder to stop the rot from spreading. Night sky in the universe of Warhammer for okay. Remember that the stars are not a sanctuary. They are a fragile battleground, floating precariously upon an ocean of predatory madness. The destruction of a planet by a warp storm is a chilling reminder of humanity's true place in the cosmos. We are not the masters of the galaxy. We are mere trespassers, desperately clinging to an illusion of order in a reality ultimately ruled by absolute, malicious chaos. A world swallowed by the Immaterium does not die a natural, quiet death. It is unmade, its physical history utterly corrupted, and the souls of its people condemned to an agonizing and ending eternity. The next time you hear localized vox static or witness an unnatural, bruised roar in the sky, pray to the God Emperor that it is merely a failing piece of ancient technology. Because if the veil is tearing, there is nowhere left to hide. The silence that follows the storm is nothing but the void listening to you scream. If you have survived this journey into the dark heart of the Empyrean, prove your resolve. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this knowledge with your fellow loyalists. The Imperium needs every awakened mind it can muster to hold back the encroaching tide of nightmare.